Welcome to America's Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for intel, forecasts, and success strategies. Hello, I'm Michael Bull. I appreciate you being with us. This segment is brought to you by Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Check it out. It's training for commercial agents. There's 21 one-hour videos, or you can just listen to the audio portion. It's the commercialagentsuccess.com. Well, today we're talking about student housing, and student housing has been part of the multifamily world that's continued to do well, and a lot of people are very interested in it. And I think one of the concepts that is starting to kind of move from, though it's always been into student housing, it's starting to move into regular apartment, is kind of the co-living aspect, how student housing properties are rented by the room. Started to happen in market apartments, and in part kind of helping with affordability out there. But let's look at student housing in particular. What's going on? What should we expect moving forward? Are we oversupplied? Are rents doing well? Let's check it out. Please welcome my guest. It's Carl Whitaker, and he's manager of market analytics with RealPage, and he's joining us on Skype. Carl, thanks for being with us, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Well, first of all, let me ask you about just overall, when you look at student housing performance, what do you see for rental rates and occupancy? How is the sector doing?
Sure. So in some of our early 2019 numbers, we're seeing performance pretty closely match what we saw in 2018. And we've recently featured some 2018 and previous years statistics on some webcasts that we've produced. But overall, performance looks to be pretty steady. We're not necessarily seeing a lot of acceleration in performance in the industry right now, but all considered, considering how many new beds we've delivered over the past 7 or 8 years, I think demand is healthy enough that it's kept performance pretty buoyant and pretty healthy this late in the cycle.
Yeah, well, I have 2 children in college, and it seems like the rents are expensive. They seem like the rents are high. Maybe when you're on the paying side, everything seems expensive, right?
Yeah.
So are the rental rates kind of flat? Are they rising? Overall, what do you see?
So in 2018, we saw rents increase a little over 1.5%. Now, kind of like you mentioned, there's really 2 ways of looking at that. If you compare that to conventional performance, that might seem like a fairly low rental increase rate. But historically speaking, for the student industry, that's not terribly out of line with what we've seen in recent years. I think in 14 and 15, we were looking at cycle high rental increases of about 2.2, 2.3%. So really not a whole lot of change there. If you look at properties closer to campus, we typically break those out into 1/2 mile ranges, and then 1/2 mile to 1 mile of campus, and then greater than 1 mile from campus. We do see properties closest to campus command monthly rents about $130 greater per month than their further away counterparts. But again, all considered, when looking at rental increases, we saw about 1.6% annual growth in 18. And I think as we move forward into 19, we'll probably see something around that range too.
Okay. And do you see a similar performance trend with the distance from the college related to occupancy?
Sure. So we actually see that even more pronounced in terms of occupancy. I think it's just a reflection of the trend that, and perhaps your children in college can attest to this. They want to live next to campus. They want to live where all the amenities are, and they want to be able to walk to and from campus. Now, that doesn't mean that properties further away can't outperform, but there certainly is a trend that students do want to live close to campus. And looking at 2018's occupancy, the market was sitting at about 93.5% occupied, but those properties closest to campus were about 95%. So we saw a pretty significant premium on those closer to campus properties.
Yeah, and they both seem pretty healthy, right? And you mentioned that we've had a good bit of new supply. What do you really see there? Are we doing the right amount of new supply, or are we oversupplied?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the student side, it's specifically more so than the conventional side. You've really got to break it down at the university by university level. Broadly speaking, I would say that we're probably building about the right pace over the past 4 years. The real story has been that there is no story in terms of changing the number of beds being delivered. We've seen anywhere from 44,000 to, I believe in 2019, we're expecting about 48, 49,000 beds delivering. So there really hasn't been a lot of change there. I think developers have found that sweet spot between the mid to upper 40 range for annual beds delivering. But again, when you break that down on a campus by campus basis, you'll see some campuses that are probably teetering on the overbuilt side of things, and you'll see some campuses that really just haven't attracted a whole lot of new development in recent years.
Yeah, well, what do you expect moving forward, Carl, for occupancy and demand? What are you seeing maybe for pre-leasing for the fall?
So for our fall pre-leasing, we actually just compiled some statistics, and as of April, we saw that for fall 2019, pre-leasing is actually a little bit ahead of what we saw last year. Now it's a fairly marginal premium. We're looking at about 120, 130 basis points faster pre-leasing than what we saw in 2018. So things may be shaping up to be a little bit stronger in 2019, but to counter that, we're also expecting, again, another 48, 49,000 beds delivering, whereas we only saw 43, 44 the year prior. So I think there's, again, kind of that balance there that, barring some sort of near-term significant demand boost, that we'll probably look at, again, a year where we see 1.5% to 2% annual growth on rents and occupancy somewhere in that 93 to 94% range.
Okay, we're talking with Carl Whitaker with RealPage about student housing. And Carl, when you think about student housing and demand, are demographics favorable for student housing, or do we expect a good demand to still be there as years to come?
I think so. So if you look at and again, to bring your kids into the discussion here, you can probably attest to the fact that a lot of secondary schools or a lot of high schools are certainly encouraging either the community college or the four-year college route. So I certainly don't think we'll see demand for student housing decelerate, just from the simple fact that we've got a lot of students that are entering universities. Now, there is a second part to that equation that could be worth exploring a bit further when we look at how long students are staying in school, i.e., are they staying for a second degree or are they staying for a master's degree? And if they do, then what does that provide to the student industry, or what tailwind does that provide? But just from a simple demographics and a volume perspective, I think the tailwinds look fairly strong for student housing for the foreseeable future.
That's good. So are less students staying around for getting their master's? My daughter was very interested in doing that. She just graduated from UGA last week. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And she talked to a lot of people, advisors, and they said, look, this job market is so strong right now. You should really kind of get out in the job market and get your master's in the evenings or something. So what are you seeing? Are people staying in school right now or not?
Yeah, I actually think you prefaced it there perfectly. When the job market's strong, there's not quite as much incentive to stay in school. Perhaps you can even get hired on at an employer that'll pay for your master's. So if anything, it really incentivizes you to jump into the job market when you do finish that four-year degree. Now, if we do see some economic softness in the future, perhaps job growth slows down, perhaps we see more students staying for that master's degree, or perhaps students realizing that maybe they should have entered a different field, so they've already got their core 60 hours completed and think, it's only another 2 years for me to get another degree. Perhaps I can complement the first degree that I received. So I think if we see some economic softness entering the picture or job growth slowing down, maybe we do see more students staying for a little bit longer. But at the moment, again, you prefaced it perfectly that it's the job market's good, so students are entering the employment situation with a lot of gusto.
Yeah. What about opportunities out there, Carl? As you mentioned, you got to look at this on a university by university basis. Are there certain markets where you think there might be some opportunities?
Yeah, and it's funny. This is gonna. I don't mean for this to sound like a cliche answer, but I think there's opportunities at every university across the nation. It just depends on your portfolio strategy. It depends on whether you're on the development side of things or the operational side of things. But there's really opportunities across the board, and something that we've internally been reflecting on and compiling the data and analyzing the data, interpreting it for clients, is how can we break down this data so that it's more meaningful in identifying those good opportunities. And so, for instance, a lot of times we hear of these tier one schools where you've got state-funded schools that are large universities, kind of think your Division I football programs. A lot of developers, owners, and operators have really played in that realm almost exclusively, and have overlooked some of these Division II schools, some of these, again, to use the football analogy, some of these FCS schools. But a lot of these schools have just as great of opportunities. I think the challenge there is that when the enrollment is smaller, a new delivery or more beds being delivered in 1 year might be able to sway things a little bit more drastically than would happen at a larger university. But I think just, again, not to sound cliche, but I think there's opportunities at really just about every school across the nation.
And what do you see for value trends, pricing trends for these communities, when they sell?
Yeah, so in looking at the capital markets, we've seen cap rates track pretty similarly to what we've seen on the conventional side. Now, the cap rate itself, that number, is a bit different than the conventional side of things, but we have seen cap rates compressing. It's harder to get those deals done. A couple years ago, you might have looked at 3, 4, 5 deals before pulling the trigger. Now, maybe you're having to make an offer on a dozen or more properties before finding that one that really makes sense, or finding one that you weren't necessarily outbid on. But price per unit is going up at these properties, or price per bed, I suppose, in the student world, and that's causing some cap rates to compress there.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, Carl, great information, and we appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And if you'd like more information from RealPage, check them out. They're realpage.com, and they have a lot of great information. They also have some great software tools and systems, so check it out. And today with us, we'll have more on the student housing market. I'm Michael Bull. This is America's Commercial Real Estate Show. Stay with us. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty. For customized asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Incredible training for commercial agents. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com. Red IQ, turning multifamily data into actionable intelligence. Visit rediq.com.